It was a typical spring morning when the Jackson family moved into their new home. The house was large and old, nestled on a quiet street on the edge of town. The family had spent months searching for the perfect place to call their own, and they were excited to finally settle into this charming but slightly worn two-story house. It was the kind of house that whispered history with every creaky floorboard and cracked window. But for the Jacksons it was a fresh start, a new chapter in their lives. There was Jake, the father, a hard-working man who loved his family deeply. He worked long hours as an engineer, always putting in the effort to ensure they had everything they needed. Then there was Laura, his wife, who had a quiet, nurturing spirit. She was the heart of their home, organizing everything with care and ensuring that their two children, Emily and Sam, had the love and attention they needed. Emily, at 12 years old, was energetic and bright, always with a smile on her face. Sam, the younger brother at 8, was quieter, more reserved, but had a kind heart and a love for animals that matched his mother's. As they unloaded their boxes and began to set up their new life in the house, everything seemed perfect. They spent their first evening in the living room, unpacking and laughing together, and the house seemed to hum with the promise of new beginnings. In the corner of the yard, there was a large, rusted gate that led into a small, neglected area. The family wasn't sure what it was, a shed, perhaps, or a small barn. But what they didn't know was that this gate would lead them to a life-changing encounter, one that would alter the course of their lives forever. It was about a week after they moved in when Laura decided to explore the yard more thoroughly. She had always enjoyed the outdoors and wanted to make sure the family had enough space to play. As she walked along the edge of the property, she noticed the gate. The hinges creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a small, overgrown area hidden behind some trees. At first, it seemed like just a forgotten part of the property, but as she walked closer, she heard a soft whimpering sound. Laura stopped in her tracks. She wasn't sure what she was hearing, but there was no mistaking it, the sound of something or someone in distress. Following the sound, she carefully pushed aside some overgrown weeds and shrubs to find a small, scruffy dog huddled in the corner of the yard. His coat was matted with dirt, his ribs visible under his fur, and his eyes wide with fear. The dog looked up at Laura, trembling and weak, and for a moment their gazes locked. Laura's heart broke. It was clear that the dog had been abandoned and left to fend for himself. He was malnourished, dehydrated, and covered in cuts and bruises, likely from wandering the property for who knows how long. Without hesitation, Laura knelt down, offering her hand gently toward the dog. He hesitated, but when she spoke softly to him, his ears perked, and he cautiously approached, licking her hand with gratitude and relief. Laura knew right then that she couldn't leave the dog there. She scooped him up, cradling him in her arms, and carefully carried him inside. She wrapped him in a blanket and gave him water, doing her best to comfort him. Her heart ached for the poor creature, and she couldn't understand why anyone would abandon him like that. As she looked into his eyes, she felt an unspoken bond forming between them. She decided that she would take care of him, and with her family's approval, they would adopt him into their home. The family was shocked at first, especially Jake, who had not planned on getting a dog. But once they saw how quickly the dog, whom they named Max, began to respond to Laura's care, they couldn't help but fall in love with him. Max was shy at first, hiding under the couch or retreating to his bed whenever anyone approached him. But as the days passed, he slowly grew more comfortable. His coat started to regain some of its shine, and he began to trust the Jackson family more with every passing day. Max became a part of their family. He would follow Emily and Sam around the house, always there to greet them with a wagging tail. At night, he would curl up by Laura's feet on the couch, content to be close to the family who had rescued him from his lonely existence. Jake, who had initially been hesitant, found himself taking Max on long walks and playing fetch with him in the yard. Max's presence brought a warmth to the Jacksons' home that they hadn't expected. Months passed and the family grew closer. But then one fateful night, everything changed. It was a stormy evening, the kind of night where the wind howled through the trees and the rain battered against the windows. The Jacksons had just finished dinner and were getting ready for bed when the power suddenly went out. The house was plunged into darkness, and the sound of the storm outside only seemed to amplify the stillness inside. Laura went to check the circuit breakers while Jake grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Emily and Sam huddled together on the couch, anxious but trying to stay calm. Max, who had been lying at the foot of the stairs, suddenly stood up and began to growl, a low warning sound that sent a chill down Jake's spine. Max wasn't a dog who often barked or growled, so this behavior was completely out of character for him. His hackles were raised and his eyes were fixed on the front door, his body tense with alarm. "Max? What's wrong, boy?" Jake called out, but Max didn't respond. Instead, he trotted to the door, pacing back and forth as if something had triggered his instincts. Before anyone could react, the sound of footsteps on the porch echoed through the house, followed by a loud banging on the door. Max's growl intensified, and without warning, he charged toward the door, barking furiously. Laura, who had just returned from the circuit breaker, froze when she saw the urgency in Max's behavior. Jake approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. What he saw sent a wave of panic through him. Two men shrouded in raincoats standing on the porch, their faces obscured by the shadows. They didn't seem to be selling anything or looking for help. They were standing still, staring straight ahead with eerie stillness. Without a word, Jake bolted the door and grabbed Laura's arm, pulling her and the kids away from the front door. Max continued to bark loudly, his body trembling with the same instinctual fear that had gripped him moments before. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest as he frantically thought of what to do next. The house was isolated, surrounded by woods on all sides, and there was no one else nearby to help. Suddenly, there was a loud crash as the back door of the house was kicked open. The sound of footsteps, heavy and determined, echoed through the hallway as the intruders entered. Jake's mind raced as he realized they were in the house. "Get to the basement," he whispered urgently to Laura, who immediately grabbed Emily and Sam's hands. They rushed toward the back of the house, but before they could make it down the stairs, the intruders were upon them. But Max wasn't about to let that happen. With a sudden burst of energy, Max lunged at the intruders, his barking louder and more aggressive than ever. One of the men staggered back in shock, and Max bit at his leg, forcing him to fall to the floor. The second intruder reached for a weapon, but Max was faster. He jumped at the man, knocking the weapon out of his hand and pushing him away with all his might. The man screamed in pain and confusion, but Max didn't stop. He continued to defend the Jacksons, not backing down for a second. The family, now safe in the basement, listened in shock as the commotion upstairs escalated. Max's growls and barks reverberated throughout the house, and the two intruders seemed to hesitate. They had not expected such a fierce response from the dog, who had been nothing but gentle and loving since his rescue. Soon the sounds of struggling and yelling were replaced by silence. The police arrived moments later, responding to an anonymous tip-off about a break-in at the Jacksons' house. When they entered, they found the two intruders bound and subdued in the living room, with Max standing protectively in front of them, his chest heaving, his fur matted with sweat and dirt. The intruders, too terrified and beaten, had given up their plans and waited for the authorities to arrive. Jake and Laura, still in the basement, were in disbelief. Max had saved their lives. His courage and loyalty had kept their family safe in a moment of unimaginable danger. They had never known that the dog they had rescued would become their greatest protector, their hero. The police took the intruders into custody, and the Jacksons were left in shock, trying to comprehend everything that had just transpired. The storm outside had finally settled, but their hearts were still racing. Max, who had been trembling moments before, now sat quietly by their side, looking up at them with his gentle, loyal eyes. The next morning, the Jacksons woke up to a quiet house, but there was no mistaking the bond they had with Max. He had become more than just a pet. He had become their savior, their hero. In the weeks that followed, the Jacksons made sure to tell everyone about Max's bravery. Word of his actions spread quickly, and he became a local legend. Max had gone from being a stray, abandoned and alone, to becoming the dog who saved a family from tragedy. His transformation was nothing short of miraculous, and the Jacksons would forever be grateful for the loyal companion who had turned out to be more than they ever expected. Max's story was a reminder that sometimes the creatures we rescue end up saving us in ways we could never have imagined. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled amidst rolling hills and lush greenery, lived the Miller family. John, Emily, and their two children, 10-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Ben, were a picture of suburban bliss. Their lives revolved around their home, their school, and their community. But one fateful day, their lives were about to take an unexpected turn. The Millers were driving home from a weekend camping trip when their car began to sputter and eventually came to a halt on a deserted stretch of highway. As they waited for help to arrive, a storm began to brew, darkening the sky and unleashing a torrent of rain. The storm intensified, and soon the Millers' car was engulfed in a flash flood, the raging waters threatening to sweep them away. Just as despair began to set in, a lone figure emerged from the swirling waters. It was a scruffy mixed-breed dog, drenched and shivering, but with a look of determination in its eyes. The dog, a stray that had been wandering the nearby woods, had witnessed the Millers' plight and was determined to help. The dog barked loudly, catching the attention of the Millers. He then proceeded to swim towards the car, barking and nudging the door with his snout. Seeing the dog's desperate efforts, the Millers realized that he was trying to help them escape the rising waters. With renewed hope, the Millers followed the dog's lead, climbing out of the car window and onto the dog's back. One by one they clung to the dog's fur as he swam through the raging current, his powerful strokes carrying them towards safety. Just as their strength began to wane, they reached higher ground, the dog collapsing onto the muddy bank, exhausted but triumphant. The Millers, soaked and shivering, embraced the dog, their gratitude overflowing. They had been saved from certain death thanks to the selfless bravery of a stray dog. News of the dog's heroic deed spread like wildfire, capturing the hearts of people across the nation. The Millers, forever grateful, decided to adopt the dog, naming him Hero. Hero became a beloved member of the Miller family, his place in their hearts forever cemented by his act of extraordinary courage. But the story didn't end there. As Hero settled into his new life, he began to exhibit a peculiar behavior. He would often stare intently at the television, his ears perked up as if listening to something beyond the screen. One day, as the family was watching the news, a report flashed across the screen about a missing hiker in the nearby mountains. The hiker, a young woman named Sarah, had been caught in a blizzard and was feared lost. The search party had been unable to locate her, and her chances of survival were dwindling. As the news report continued, Hero began to whine and pace, his eyes fixed on the television screen. He then proceeded to pull on Emily's sleeve, leading her towards the front door. Emily, sensing Hero's urgency, followed him, her heart pounding with a strange sense of foreboding. Hero led Emily and Ben deep into the woods, his nose to the ground, his movements purposeful and determined. After what seemed like an eternity, Hero stopped, his ears perked up, his eyes fixed on a particular spot under a large oak tree. Emily and Ben cautiously approached the spot, their breath catching in their throats. There, huddled under the tree, shivering and weak, was Sarah, the missing hiker. She was alive but barely conscious, her body battered by the elements. Emily and Ben rushed to Sarah's aid, wrapping her in their jackets and calling for help. Thanks to Hero's uncanny sense of smell and his unwavering determination, Sarah was rescued just in time. The news of Hero's second heroic deed spread like wildfire, further cementing his status as a local legend. His story became a testament to the extraordinary bond between humans and animals, a reminder that even the most unexpected creatures can possess extraordinary courage and compassion. Hero's story is a tale of resilience, hope, and the power of love. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that the most unexpected heroes can emerge from the most unlikely places.